Good evening, everyone. My name is Hank Cutler. I'm a member of the West Jersey chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. Tonight's presentation will be a rather unique look at historic South Jersey railroads from a collection of photographs. Tonight's photographs are by no means a complete history of the past railroads and ferries in our area. The collection represents a window that looks into the past and creates an opportunity for rail fans to want to learn more. These images seen tonight were all printed on photographic paper, and presumably the negatives and prints were traded among rail fans some time ago. Each photograph had information on the back that was verified and researched to the best of my knowledge. I grouped the images by railroad for better understanding in my presentation. Tonight's presentation mostly highlights the steam era and concentrates on passenger operations. Some of the images can be seen in West Jersey chapter publications, and hopefully you will see new ones tonight. Thank you, everybody, for listening to my presentation tonight. It's a very notes-intensive presentation, so you'll pardon me as I go from one slide to another with Fred's help. So my first section will include the Atlantic City Railroad, the Reading Seashore lines, and the steam locomotives of the Reading and Philadelphia and Reading railroads. I use these three books as references for the first section. The first two are chapter publications, the Atlantic City Railroad, written by Will Coxey and W. George Cook, which has been out of print for a while, so I'm told, and the Reading Seashore lines, which we have for sale, I think, right, Dave? The book on the right is for everything steam engines for the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad and their successor, the Reading Railroads. A little bit about this section here, a little bit of history. The Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, also known as the P&R, was incorporated in 1833 and was the predecessor to the Reading Railroad. The Philadelphia and Atlantic Railroad and the Camden, Gloucester, and Mount Ephraim Railway were Philadelphia and Reading subsidiaries. Steam engines for the P&R were either built at the Reading shops or by Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia. The P&R reached out to Baldwin to manufacture the first locomotive in the 1830s. The P&R Railroad merged 5 other South Jersey railroads to create the Atlantic City Railroad April 1st, 1889, which I'll refer to as the ACRR just for time's sake. Throughout the presentation tonight, some of the locomotives shown here are either in Camden or Atlantic City. The Masters Mechanic Association convention was frequently held in Atlantic City. These yearly conventions displayed new locomotives and rolling stock from several railroad manufacturers for all to see and touch. The convention started circa 1867 and were discontinued in the 1950s. Atlantic City's Tennessee Avenue Terminal was frequently chosen as a venue to host the convention on a summer day in June. So that's a little prelude to the slides I'm going to show you. And we go on to the slides. This is the Reading and Atlantic City Railroad Terminal at Canes Point Terminal in Camden. The time is opening week and the date is May 19th, 1924. The terminal opened 5 days earlier on May 14th. On April 30th, 1938, this terminal closed with the consolidation of the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading Railroad, diverting Reading Railroad traffic to the PRR's Federal Street Terminal. This is part of the Don Lee collection. Thank you, Don. Next is another view of the Atlantic City Railroad and Reading Terminal in Camden. This is photographed on the first day of operation when it ceremoniously opened on May 14th, 1924. And by the way, I got lucky with some of these photographs that they listed the date on there as a further verification. Our first locomotive of the night is Baldwin 326, which is a 442 wheel configuration. It's a P3A class, built May of 1900. 326 is proudly displayed, possibly on the way to the ACRR Master Mechanic Convention. The Philadelphia and Reading shops rebuilt and reclassed this locomotive twice, and it was scrapped in 1933. Photographs at the ACRR Canes Point Terminal in Camden on June 1902, 326 would soon leave Camden for Atlantic City. This is what one view of the Atlantic City Railroad Terminal in Atlantic City, of course, January 19th, 1930. I'm not sure of the photographer. This is one of my favorite pictures. Reading Locomotive 185 was a 440, originally numbered 143, built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in June of 1883. The construction number was 6814. The P&R Reading shops rebuilt Locomotive 143 in 1898, and it was renumbered to 185, as you see here, and it was rebuilt as a Class D3E in 1900. 185 was scrapped in June of 1924. I'm not sure the location of this photograph, but take a look at the structures on either side of the headlight where it displays 185. If anybody has a clue what they are, I mean, it looks like Verizon Wireless to me. I'm not sure. Maybe you could tell me at the end of the presentation. Hope it gets better reception than I do in Cherry Hill. Philadelphia and Reading Camelback Class D2C 440 wheel arrangement with a Wooten firebox that when you read about camelbacks, especially with the Reading Railroad, you'll see a lot of these Wooten fireboxes. The image was photographed circa 1900. 442 was built in 1882 at the P&R shops and finally retired in 1907. Note the builder's plate, which is below the two smokestacks there. Oddly enough, that builder's plate is circular, which is the same for Baldwin locomotives as it is for the P&R shops. Maybe a lot of you have seen this picture. Narrow gauge 34 passenger first class coach from the Camden, Gloucester, and Mount Ephraim Railroad. This railroad was acquired by the Philadelphia and Reading in 1884. A year later, this was converted to standard gauge. And this photograph appears to be from the Thomas Barnett collection. By the way, I'll take questions at the end. Philadelphia and Reading 133, built in 1924, was a Baldwin G1 SA with a full tender of coal behind it. I happen to know this location means that they were starting off in Camden on the way to Atlantic City, which explains the tender being full. Notice there's only 2 passenger cars, which means that it wasn't one of their frequent packed trips to Atlantic City. The location is 10th Street near Bolson Street in Camden. This image was photographed March of 1934 after the consolidation of the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading Railroad in 1933. Not visible in the upper right corner is the Camden Forge Company, who listed their address as Mount Ephraim Avenue and the Atlantic City Railroad. This is from the Thomas Barnett collection. When I was researching this, I happened to find this on the internet from the Hagley Archives dated 1939. This shows the Camden Forge Company and the tracks. So you get a perspective. Go up, just the previous one. So you get go up one. There, so you get a perspective. The Camden Forge Company was the upper right-hand corner. Right, go to. Perfect. Camelback 339 on the ACRR tracks was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works as a P4C class in the May of 1904. It was rebuilt by the P&R shops in 1914 as a P4-F and then scrapped in 1935. This was photographed in Camden, June 25th, 1925. This is Atlantic City Terminal, Atlantic City Railroad in 1910. And by the way, on center left, you'll see a pole there with a cross pole with it. That's part of the Atlantic City trolley that ran to Margate, and Longport. And you'll see more about that later in the presentation. This is the Atlantic City and Reading Railroad ferry terminal in Camden around the turn of the 20th century. The Philadelphia and Reading Railroad owned and operated these particular two ferries. The ferry terminal was built in 1891 and was rebuilt several times. On the left is the steamboat City of Reading, which was built in 1889 and finally sold in 1926 privately. The steamboat Philadelphia is seen here in the middle of the screen, was built in 1896 and later renamed the City of Reading in 1926, and that was later scrapped in 1942. The last Reading ferry sailed April 30th, 1938. This locomotive was photographed at many different locations in service from Camden to Atlantic City, as I could see in many publications. The location was the Atlantic City Railroad trackage of the Reading Railroad. This is a P6A class Atlantic 442, built June 1911 at the P&R Reading shops. 300 was rebuilt in 1917 and reclassed as a P6 SB. Was scrapped in October of 1948. This image was at Bolson Street Yard near Canesport Terminal in Camden. And by the way, the car behind the tender is a post office car. Philadelphia and Reading locomotive 344 was also a 442 wheel arrangement. And this is a P5A class Atlantic en route to Atlantic City on the Atlantic City Railroad tracks. The location at Canes Point Terminal, again in Camden, 1906. It was built in the P&R shops May 1906 and rebuilt June 1912 and reclassed to a P5C. In 1924, it was rebuilt again as a P5SC. The S stood for superheater. And then it was scrapped in October 1948. Apparently the same time that locomotive 300 on the previous slide was scrapped. This is the Atlantic City Railroad ferry terminal, but on the Philadelphia side, which would be Chestnut Street most likely. The Atlantic City Railroad was incorporated in 1889, like I said in one of the beginning slides. And the ferry terminal was built in 1891. You'll find out later that it was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt. This is Atlantic City Railroad and the Reading Railroad ferry terminal, circa 1900 at Chestnut Street, built around the time of the photograph, 1900. You will see more about the ferries with the Reading and Pennsylvania railroads later in the presentation. The ferry lines added to the bottom line of the railroads and allowed passengers to continue on rails across the Delaware River. This is from the collection of Theodore Zanis. Again, this is Atlantic City Rail Terminal, Atlantic City, January 19th, 1930. Again, the pole that you see in the middle is part of the Atlantic City trolley. These trolley poles seem to remain all the way to the end of the trolley service in 1955. And again, I'll talk more about the Atlantic City trolleys. And this is, again, Theodore Zanis' collection. This is Camden's Reading Atlantic City Railroad train and ferry terminal, May 14th. That's opening day, 1924, Canes Point Terminal, replacing the older terminal that was destroyed by fire in January of 1915. So the original terminal was built in 1891. It was rebuilt in 1915. Then that caught fire and burned down. And here we are on number 3. It was rebuilt May 4th. Well, opening day was May 14th, 1924. So as long as you have all that straight. The Reading Ferry Terminal on the Philadelphia side was at Chestnut Street in the river. And again, The ferry operation closed April 30th, 1938. Yes, I have a map of that to remind myself. Thank you. You got it? This beautiful locomotive is Reading G2SA, built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in May of 1926. Construction number is 59226. This is Atlantic City on the Mississippi Avenue branch during a Master Mechanics Convention, June 1926. The Reading Railroad Bridge over the bay entered Atlantic City on Mississippi Avenue, but they refer to it as the Mississippi Avenue branch. In tow is behind 175 is switching engine number 50, which was a class OE1 built by a consortium of the American Locomotive Company, known as ALCO, General Electric, and Ingersoll Rand companies. So all three of them got together to build locomotive number 50 here, which is behind the tender. Number 50 is a 60-ton, 300 horsepower oil electric diesel, construction number 66682, which was built June of 1926. It was renumbered 98 in August of 1940. This looks like a Reading Company photo, although the photo was didn't have a photographer attached to it. This is inspection locomotive 103. In October 1903, the P&R shops rebuilt locomotive 116, which was a C3A class 440 locomotive. And they built 116 to become inspection engine 103. This engine started life as P&R number 328, which they called the Sitka, because in the earlier days, they named the engines, and in the later periods, like usually about 1870 and beyond, then they were numbered. 328 was built in the P&R shops in August 1871. 103 was finally scrapped in August of 1912.
Do you have any idea where that was taken?
No, I don't. I wish I did. Okay, so this is part 2 of the oil electric diesels. This 300 horsepower beauty was Reading's 60-ton oil electric locomotive built in March 22nd of 1928, again by a consortium of the American Locomotive Company, General Electric, and Ingersoll Rand. The location is Jackson Street near Ferry Avenue on the siding at the Evenson and Son Soap Factory. The unknown photographer captured this beautiful image on July 16, 1938. Underneath the 51, you'll see the initials GS. GS stands for the Green Street facility in Philadelphia, where it was serviced. Diesel locomotive 51 is a class OE2. Number 50, on the couple slides before, was an OE1. And again, I found this searching on the internet. Here you could see the Evenson and Levering soap plant. You could see the railroad there by the side. And I'm not sure where the siding came in, but just for your interest, there's the railroad. Okay, we leave the Atlantic City Railroad in the Reading. And our next section is the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad and the PRR. The West Jersey and Seashore Railroad, a subsidiary of the Pennsylvania Railroad, was formed May 4th, 1896 to consolidate 5 smaller southern New Jersey railroads, including the Camden and Atlantic. What can I say about the Pennsylvania Railroad you don't already know? The Pennsylvania Railroad was incorporated in 1846 and soon became the largest corporation in the world at its peak in 1882. Perhaps you've heard of the PRR's locomotive shops, Altoona and Juniata. The Altoona shops predated the Juniata shops, with both operating simultaneously at one time. And the next group of locomotives you'll see were either built at Altoona or Juniata. This is the Haddon Avenue station in Camden. Camden and Amboy and the West Jersey Railroad tracks are shown in this photograph circa 1880. The West Jersey Railroad tracks are in the foreground. The Camden and Amboy tracks are behind the station. Both the Camden and Amboy and the West Jersey Railroads were eventually controlled by the PRR. In 1908, due to mounting pressure to eliminate grade crossing accidents, the PRR built the elevated Broadway station to replace the Haddon Avenue station on the previous slide. The photograph is undated, but looking at the wagon and looking at the trolleys, this has got to be very early 1900. Okay, so we go topside here, and this is the PRR Broadway station, circa 1910, photographed by J.B. Cooper. All right, let's go down south. West Jersey and Seashore, Tennessee Avenue station for electric lines in Atlantic City, photographed June 10th, 1926. This terminal was created for the EMU coaches when the PRR electrified the route to Atlantic City in 1906. The steam terminal was located at South Carolina Avenue, and for the electric trains coming to Atlantic City, it was here at Tennessee Avenue. And that 1906 power came from the Westville Powerhouse, supplying electricity to the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad. This is circa 1910. Notice the coal hoppers there on the upper level, supplying coal to the powerhouse. The tracks were electrified from Camden to Atlantic City via the Newfield branch starting in 1906. Inside the Westville Powerhouse, August 20th, 1909, this photograph is part of the Wilcoxie collection. Cooper's Point Camden Round Table, circa 1900. This was the West Jersey and Seashore's terminal by the Delaware River. Note that the locomotives here are all 440 configuration, which around that time was PRR's standard locomotives for the smaller passenger branches. This beauty is the PRR 5498, a legendary K4S, which is a 462 Pacific. 5498 was one of 425 K4Ss constructed between 1914 and 1928 between the Juniata and the Baldwin shops. This locomotive was manufactured at the Juniata shops February 1928 and scrapped in 1956. 5498 was photographed here at the Masters Mechanic Convention in AC, June 1930 at the Tennessee Avenue station. Down on the front of the locomotive, you'll see EJ, which stands for Eastern Region New Jersey Division, and the ME on the other side stands for Meadows Engine House, Kearney, New Jersey. To the left is an L5 class DC electric locomotive built October 1927.
You know what that is over on the right there?
It looks like a streamlined K4. I don't know. There's a video of the Masters convention in 1930 that shows the Blue Comet, and it shows a locomotive like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
The main standing on the bar, is that bar just an access bar, or is that a functioning water pipe? It's a handrail. Yeah.
I would say it's a handrail.
But they use conduits too.
Yeah, look how highly waxed it is. Experimental electric locomotive built 1905 at PRR's Juniata shops. Equipped for DC electric, 10,002 first ran on the Long Island Railroad and later on the West Jersey and Seashore near Franklinville. West Jersey and Seashore terminal in Atlantic City circa 1900. Allen Tower, Pennsylvania Railroad, located near 3rd Street, Camden, 1950. It's a Camden Iron Company that you see there in the center left. This was photographed by Don Wentzel. Trackage from the Broadway station to the river was controlled by this tower. And City Hall in the background. PRR Federal Street and Ferry Terminal, Camden, September 1932. Note City Hall was completed the year prior, 1931. Most likely a passenger engine. This E2 class 442 was built in May 1901 at the PRR Juniata shops. Construction number was 777, boasting 80-inch drivers and renumbered 6066 in 1903. West Jersey and Seashore and PRR Camden Terminal at the end of Federal Street, photographed mid-1920s. The Federal Street Terminal was built in 1901. This is part of the Thomas Barnett collection. Photographed circa 1905, 964 was built in the Altoona shops, December 1882. This is a B-class 060 switcher. West Jersey and Seashore P-class 440, built 1890 at the Altoona shops with 68-inch drivers. The class of engine was designed for heavy express passenger service. This was circa 1895, photographed in Camden. In 1904, it was renumbered as per West Jersey and Seashore locomotive numbering, becoming 6010. Remember, a couple slides ago, it was a 2-digit number becoming a 4-digit number. It was finally scrapped in 1923. Here's a PRR switcher. I think I see 6 wheels here, making it most likely a B6 060. Notice it has a slope tender, the second locomotive to have that. Those slope tenders added better visibility when they back up, maybe less weight for switching operations. This is Delaware Avenue in Philadelphia, 1937.
Looks like the L is being dismantled there.
Yeah, and by the way, I no matter how much I blow up the picture, I can't see the 4-digit number on here. Liberty Street Station in Camden of the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad, circa 1910. Yeah, I know. Pardon the person bending over. Let's go back to the Tennessee Avenue Electric Station, Atlantic City, June 1919. How strange, at the Masters Mechanic Association convention. I don't know why there's so many photographs in my collection from the Masters convention, but it's a good history of the railroads. To the right are MU coaches on the electrified West Jersey and Seashore's Newfield branch. The locomotive to the left is PRR 6700 class HC1S. It's a 2880 configuration. Construction number was 3633, built in the Juniata shops, June of 1919. It was experimental and the only one of its type built. No, it didn't. It was scrapped in August 1929, and this is part of the J.E. Cranfield collection. This one in here. This is a chock full of fact photograph here. This is the West Jersey Ferry Company, Market Street, Camden. The ferry company was known as the Market Street Ferry, or just the Market Street Ferry. This ferry company had origins that went back to 1849 and had merged to become part of the Philadelphia and Camden Ferry Company in 1899. The Camden and Amboy Railroad reached Camden in the 1830s and ferried passengers to Philadelphia. We think somewhere around Federal Street, but I'm not 100% sure. This image was taken in the 1890s. The Pennsylvania Railroad controlled this ferry line, and the operation of this facility closed in 1901 and transferred operations to their Federal Street facility. Here's my reminder about the ferries. This is for you and for me. All right. This is from the chapters Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Line book by Frederick Kramer. This drawing is circa 1930. It's a good reference for the ferries in there. Also, this book devoted a chapter to the railroad ferries, which helped me understand them a little better. And by the way, if you didn't notice or didn't know, Ferry Avenue in Camden is related to the Reading Ferry Terminal as opposed to the Pennsylvania Railroad Terminal. But you can see in here that the PRR Camden Terminal, in fact, you can see the roundhouse there on the bottom of that. And you can see that Market Street and Federal Street lead into the PRR Camden Terminal. And you can see that down on the bottom where the Reading Canes Point Terminal, you can see went to both South Street, Chestnut Street, and the PRR went to Market Street up top. So I found this to be useful, very useful diagram. PRR Ferry Millville, February 1952, a Robert Long photo, part of the West Jersey chapter collection. The Millville was built in 1922 and crossed the Delaware River for the last time, March 31, 1952, when the PRR ferry operation was terminated. Teddy Roosevelt campaigned from an observation coach on the West Jersey and Seashore tracks in Egg Harbor City in 1912. He lost the Republican bid that year. Good question. This undated photograph was taken in Atlantic City's Tennessee Avenue Electric Terminal at the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad. 68 wooden coaches with a combination of a third rail and overhead trolley were built in 1906 with the creation of the Westville Powerhouse, which I explained earlier. Eventually, the coaches were upgraded to steel ends for better safety. The electric train service from Camden, Atlantic City was discontinued in 1931. And by the way, with a lot of these Tennessee Avenue station, you see in the background, that's Atlantic City City Hall in the background. Pennsylvania Railroad number 988 was an 060 Class M switcher built October 1891 at the Altoona shops, which predated the Juniata shops. It was scrapped in 1905. PRR Roundhouse, photographed by Robert Long, part of the West Jersey chapter collection, photographed November 11th, 1955. In the foreground is PRR locomotive 4050, which is an H9S. It's a 280. And behind it is an H10S, which is also a 280. And by the way, I was able to read that that was an H10S by looking at the builder plate.
The roundhouse was controlled by Pennsylvania Railroad, right? And not Pennsylvania Railroad.
Right, Pennsylvania Railroad, that's correct. If I interchange them, I'm sorry about that, but correct. Here's PRR Cooper's Point in Camden. This happens to be where the Camden Atlantic Railroad began its excursions to Atlantic City 100 years ago in 1854. This was photographed in 1954 by Robert Long from the West Jersey chapter collection. Here's the PRR Federal Street Steam Terminal April 1949, photographed by Robert Long, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. Note the third rail in the foreground. Electric service on the Newfield branch was discontinued in 1931, and the electric MU coach service was terminated September 24th, 1949. Notice you see the Ben Franklin Bridge in the background. So if we switch to the right a little bit of that photograph, not taken exactly the same time, here's the Federal Street Terminal, ferry terminal, photographed in Camden, April 1954. This is the same view, but this further to the right, showing the public service buses that were dropping off passengers. The New Jersey State Aquarium Complex sits on this site today. PRR 462 K4S 1139 takes a spin at the Camden Roundhouse, August 1954. Photographed by Bob Long, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. 1139 was built in 1917 at the Juniata shops and scrapped in 1956.
Seems to be only used for steam engines. Do they use roundhouses for diesels and lasers? Or was it just a, why round?
They did. The reason those things are in there head first, because of the way the circle is, it gives you a lot more room to work on running here. At
Do
the
they
other end.
require a lot more maintenance or? Is it-
Oh, yeah.
That's why they got rid of the steam locomotives, mostly the maintenance.
The vent for the smokestack was in the front. So they had to go in head first to get under this vent for the smokestack.
Okay. Pennsylvania Railroad Station at 27th Street in Camden. This is Pavonia Station in Camden, circa 1916, an unknown photographer. Here's the PRR and the Philadelphia and Reading terminal on Delaware Avenue circa 1900. So in the background is the Reading and Atlantic City Railroad terminal, and in the foreground, as you can see, it says Pennsylvania Railroad Freight. They were competitors to the end, weren't they? PRR and Reading Seashore Line locomotive. Well, actually PRR Roundhouse, you can see here, and repair facility just south of the Federal Street Ferry Terminal in Camden. Clinton Avenue is down in the lower right corner, and the Freedom Mortgage Pavilion sits on the former site of the Roundhouse today. Just to give you some,
Almost like the same shape.
probably. Yeah, everyone's going to get a good education on Camden tonight.
Where's the Federal Street Station there? Off to the left?
Yeah.
It's off to the left because this was just, the Roundhouse was just south of the terminal. All right, here's PRR Camden Center Tower, October 1963, showing the Atlantic City main line to the left. Correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Patco still use the term center tower today? Okay, right. Okay, thank you. By the way, I'm not sure. I think in the background that multi-level white building may be the Holland's Head Corporation factory. All right, this image shows a Reading locomotive and a Bud car at PRR's Broadway station, fall 1951. Photograph taken by Robert Long, part of the West Jersey chapter collection. To the side of the Reading steam locomotive is the YMCA building to the left. And the Bud RDC, the rail diesel car, is barely a year old at the time this image was taken. Okay, concerning the YMCA building, this building was used by railroad personnel in Camden near the Broadway station circa 1957. The railroad YMCAs were meeting places for recreation, meals, and lodging for railroad employees. The first railroad YMCA was established in 1872. Robert Long took this photograph, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. And take a look in the lower left corner, gas was 28 cents, I believe.
Okay, that building had no church.
Mm.
Looks like I see the lines in there.
Yeah, I do. Good. All right. Pennsylvania Railroad's G5S 460 10-wheeler circa 1935 in Camden. 5723 was built September 1924. Construction number was 3948 at the Juniana shops. 121 G5Ss in the mid-1920s were built, including this one specifically for commuter trains. However, occasionally they did a little freight work. Sister locomotive G5S 5741 can be seen at the Railroad Museum at Strasbourg. This locomotive 5723 was scrapped in October of 1949. For a sec. Okay. Here's the PRR looking north by Walnut Street, Camden, June 1961. Patco tracks would be on the right years later. PRR station Broad Street, PRR station at Broad Street in Philadelphia, photographed February 1952. The station closed a few months later, and it was built in 1881 and had a good 71-year run. Robert Long photographed this and part of the West Jersey chapter collection. Here's the PRR Camden Ferry Terminal in June of 1951, also photographed by Robert Long, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. Okay. That made sense because I didn't see this in any Camden. Thank you for the correction. All right, this is just the West Jersey and Seashore tracks near Broadway circa 1908. As I was researching this area across the internet, next photograph, I found that's the Gulf liniment. Look down on the bottle under the word 30 cents and you'll see a picture of the building go up one. Yeah,
Oh, wrong way.
you'll see a picture of the building there.
That'd be it.
Yep. Okay, next.
Probably don't want to know.
Right. West Jersey and Seashore in the PRR Camden terminal. Undated, but it's after 1926 because you're looking at the Ben Franklin Bridge. Okay, our next section is about the Pennsylvania Reading and Seashore lines. And my main reference was our chapter publication by Frederick A. Kramer. Reading Seashore Line 060 B6SB switcher, taken 5th and Main Streets in Camden, 1947, part of the Thomas Barnett collection. The American Stores Company you see over in the right were the parent company of Acme. Acme Markets.
Acme was subsidiary of American Stores.
Okay, other way around. Got it. Thank you. Here's PRR H10S, which is a 280 near Camden Tower and Federal Street in Camden. I mean, there's locomotive, I'm sorry, the cars are pretty old there.
They look abandoned.
Already?
Think I just parked them 10 minutes.
Oh, is that what happened? Oh.
Right. Complicated one here. Right. Here's a Reading Seashore line trackage between Viola Street and Jefferson Street, looking north, March 1961. Ferry Street and Mill Tower are in the distance in the background. Brown Tower is behind the photographer. The trackage on the right belongs to the former Atlantic City Railroad, renamed the Clementon Branch. This is a West Jersey chapter collection photograph taken by Robert Long. And then Robert Long turns around and captures the Watchman shed at Jefferson Street. And this was taken March 1961. Perfect. All right, here's a Reading Seashore Line MU wooden coach photographed in Camden, no date. Again, here's another MU 58 seater, again, a wooden coach, no date, again, photographed in Camden. Robert Long in our West Jersey chapter collection photographed this pile driver. You can see the PRSL on there. He captured that April 1949. They look like batteries in the foreground. I'm not sure. Right. Let's go down to Atlantic City, April 1948. There's Union Station in the upper right-hand corner. Union Station was built for the consolidation of the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading. Okay. Ron, this is probably near and dear to you. All right. 22 Federal Street. Photographed Camden, 1951, photographed by Don Wentzel. This at one time was the headquarters of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad, and the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Line. It was originally built in 1883, and I saw an article about between 1883 and when this was taken, the building was moved a little bit. Here's another MU wooden coach on the electrified line in Camden Terminal. No date, no photographer. Okay, remember that picture of 22 Federal? The end of an era, October 23rd, 1975, fire ravages the headquarters of the former West Jersey and Seashore, PRR, and the PRSL at 22 Federal Street building. This is part of the Thomas Barnett collection. Next are some miscellaneous images that I found in my collection. Skillfully shot through a fence by Robert Long, March 30th, 1952. This is the RCA Camden plant. This may be a Plymouth switcher. I don't know for absolutely sure. And the photograph was taken by Bob Long, part of the West Jersey chapter collection.
I think that's an RCA.
Okay. All right. But the next photograph is a Plymouth switcher. This is taken at the Hollands Head Corporation in Camden, which I believe is off the Admiral Wilson Boulevard. This is a Plymouth switcher photographed by Robert Long again, part of the West Jersey chapter collection. The photograph was taken January 1953. The Plymouth Locomotive Company was based in Ohio, producing over 7,500 small locomotives of many types such as propane, diesel, butane, and electric. You name it, they made it. The Hollinshead Corporation manufactured products for home and auto. A family member of the Hollinshead family, his name was Richard Hollinshead. He invented the first drive-in movie theater in Camden in 1933. So they were an inventive bunch. Next. Okay, this is the last section of my talk tonight and a history of the area that I grew up in since a child. All right, this map is courtesy of the Atlantic City Railroad West Jersey chapter publication, written by W. Cook and W. Coxey. Just showing the railroad coming from Camden in the upper left-hand corner to Atlantic City towards the center. Okay, hope this is fairly readable. Long after the Camden Atlantic Railroad established a route from Camden to Atlantic City, the Camden Atlantic branched out to other shore points via steam engines and eventually trolleys. The following is a very brief history of the trolleys that connected Atlantic City with the shore towns of Ventnor, Margate, Longport, and Ocean City. The history of the trolley was always a PRR operation under the Camden and Atlantic and West Jersey and Seashore railroads, and eventually inherited by the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Railroad. So you can see here the various dates of how they branched south. By the way, upwards direction here is going south from Atlantic City. And you can see it ends up there in Longport. Next. The reference for this last section, I use By Rail to the Boardwalk, authored by a former member of the West Jersey chapter. This has an informative chapter about the trolleys that ran from Atlantic City to Ocean City. The book is also a good chronology of the trains that started rail traffic to Atlantic City going back to the beginnings of the Camden and Atlantic Railroad in the 1850s. Our first trolley picture here, a very old one. Camden and Atlantic, when they started their trolley service, this was one of their first offerings. This is 6838, built in the 1890s, photographed in Longport, circa 1896. Prior to overhead electric trolleys, the Camden Atlantic ran steam dummies, small locomotives without a smokestack. Electric trolley service from Virginia Avenue in Atlantic City to Longport started in April of 1889 under the management of the Camden and Atlantic and eventually the West Jersey and Seashore Railroads through their parent company, the Pennsylvania Railroad. Okay. This is a difficult picture without a pointer, but I'll try my best here. Aha. Ah, you can point in here. Okay. Looking as a reference at a 1926 map of the bay published in the chapters, the Reading Seashore lines, this is what I deduce from this picture here, that this drawbridge here would be the ACRR and the Reading line, that they said that this was the shore fast line here, and that this below it was the PRR main line that went from Haddonfield to PRR and West Jersey main line that went from Haddonfield to Atlantic City. And also on the bottom are the AC and Suburban Railway. These were kind of hard to confirm in here, but this is the bay. This is the bay here where it's Atlantic City on one side and Ventnor on the other. I mean, today you can go underneath. This is a turn bridge for the New Jersey Atlantic City line today. All right, thank you. All right, we're almost there. The PRR management needed an upgrade for the equipment that ran the original Atlantic City Avenue line from Atlantic City to Longport. In 1939, the PRR purchased 25 Brill liners from the Brill Company to replace the aging fleet. After 1945, the Brill liners were managed by the Atlantic City Transportation Company when the Reading Seashore lines washed their hands of it. In December of 1955, the trolley service stopped and they were replaced by a fleet of buses. This was taken in Longport, July 1952 by Robert Long, part of the West Jersey chapter collection. Notice the shelter for the trolley being a very typical PRR shelter design, which you see on everywhere in the smaller lines in the Pennsylvania Railroad. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the trolley in the foreground may be a shore fast trolley. The one in the background is definitely one of the Brill liners. Okay. Brill liner of the Atlantic City Transportation Company, which I said was formed in 1945. This is taken in Atlantic City, 1952 by Robert Long, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. Captain Starnes Restaurant, maybe some of you remember, at the inlet in Atlantic City. The trolley loop between Longport and this restaurant along the eastern edge of Atlantic Avenue. I used to go to that restaurant as a kid. Again, here's another picture of a Brill liner, July 1952, taken by Robert Long, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. This is the Douglas Avenue Loop in Margate. So they did go to Longport, but there apparently was a route that only went from Atlantic City to Margate, turn around on this loop to go back to Atlantic City. Margate was originally known as South Atlantic City. In addition to the trolleys that ran from Atlantic City to Longport, another trolley service called the Shore Fast Line was developed in 1906. The 11-mile route was operated by the Atlantic City and Shore Railroad. This railroad, also known as the Interurban Trolley Line, used electric trolleys built by the Brill Company along parts of the West Jersey and Seashore electrified tracks equipped with both third rail and overhead trolley lines. Electricity was supplied by the West Jersey and Seashore Westville Powerhouse. Used occasionally for freight, the tracks ran from Atlantic City Inlet to Ocean City through Pleasantville, Northfield, Linwood, and Summers Point. Pictured here is the 4,000-foot trestle that connected Ocean City's A Street terminal, A Street station, with Summers Point on a bridge that parallels today's 9th Street Bridge. In fact, this photograph maybe was taken from that bridge. The trolley line closed in 1948 due to a devastating hurricane and due to the buses taking over transportation. On January 18th, 1948, the Shore Fast Line becomes a fallen flag as number 105 runs the last trip between Atlantic City and Summers Point. The Atlantic City trolley service and the Brill liners stopped operating December 28th, 1955. This image was captured by Robert Long on September 5th, 1948, part of our West Jersey chapter collection. The shoreline? Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I don't know if you can see it down there. The picture is labeled Bay Frozen Solid. Yeah.
What year was that taken?
No date. No date. Had to be after 1906, but there's no date. Yeah, long time ago. Yeah. Last one. Correct. Thank you for listening to my presentation tonight, and major thank you to John Burlage, Don Lee, Dave Homer, and others for helping with my research.